Pompo the Cinephile is a brand new anime movie about making movies, also known as that new anime movie with a Fortnite dance in it. Yeah, I know it's technically not a Fortnite dance, but that's what everybody will call it. And this is like the only clip that the Western distributor is sharing because they know people on the internet will love it. Anyways, this movie really surprised me. Whenever new anime movies come out, I always try to watch them while knowing as little information as possible. So going into this, all I knew that it was going to be a fun and wholesome movie about film production. And it pretty much delivers exactly that, but also really amazing animation and style that I was not expecting at all. The story follows Jean, an aspiring filmmaker who's stuck being a production assistant for Pompo, one of the greatest producers in the world, who is seemingly a little girl. Pretty suddenly, Pompo decides to give Jean the role of director on a new script she wrote. And that's pretty much it. The rest of the movie just follows the production of this fictional movie that Jean's in charge of. A few problems arise, but it honestly is mostly like just a very sort of pleasant like slice of life filmmaking story. There's really only a conflict at the end, and I was almost expecting there not even to be like a big conflict, but something does end up happening. In fact, the big problem that arises is about the movie's budget, and I never would have expected a conflict about the banks and budget investment to be really interesting and exciting, but this movie did a really great job of making that interesting. The conflict was resolved with a pretty bizarre twist though. That like was probably the most unrealistic thing about the movie. Yeah, even more unrealistic than the little kid being the producer, I guess. But, I mean, it was still cute, you know? This is a very great and wholesome story. One that any animation fan or anyone interested in filmmaking should hopefully enjoy. Honestly, though, because the movie is so incredibly, like, wholesome, like, everything works out for every character, I feel like people who are really deep into films might actually be bothered by how unrealistically pleasant this movie is. You know, we need something like that every once in a while. I really love that about this movie. But I expect, like, if you told someone who's a real film buff to watch this movie, they would probably sit there and be like, well, there's no way he would have gotten that position. That's crazy. There's no way that production would have worked like this, or they would have won that award or whatever. You'll really have to suspend your disbelief quite a bit with this movie, because really everything works out, and that makes it really enjoyable and pleasant. But I feel like audiences might expect more problems to arise in a story like this. It's so wholesome and like rose-tinted glasses that really expecting like there's sort of to be like a darker twist, you know? Like, I'm so glad that there isn't, but with how many recent, you know, really dramatic like industry scandals have been coming out in real life, I was partly expecting them to make the conflict arise from something like that. Something very unpleasant, like you know, someone being an abusive worker or something, or one of the actors getting in like a drug scandal or things like that. But pleasantly, the movie doesn't go in any of those sorts of directions, and the conflict arises because of like the budget. But that's what I mean about the realism, you know? Like, I was expecting there to be some sort of surprise element of realism where like something just like dark and realistic happened, but nothing like that happens. Everything pretty much works out. Everybody's happy. Like, it's a very straightforward and pleasant story, and I really appreciate that about it, and I loved it, but I could still just see some people being bothered by it's so unrealistic, but it's pleasantly unrealistic. Not even the fact that it's, you know, a cartoon and it's cartoony. The unrealistic part is the fact that everybody leaves happy, basically, which is sad to say, but some people might expect a bit more from a movie with this sort of setting. Part of me was expecting it to pull like a Monsters University, you know, where by the end, they don't necessarily win. Like, the movie doesn't become a success in the way that they were trying to make it one. They sort of like became successful in a roundabout way, like how, you know, in Monsters University, they're trying to get into Monsters Incorporated on the scare floor, but they end up messing up and actually start working for the mailroom, and then gradually work their way up through time and effort into being scarers. So I sort of thought that this movie was going to go that kind of direction. You know, like, Gene's movie wouldn't be a big success, or like its funding would actually fall through, or it's some sort of actually realistic problem, but then like just the fact that they had fun making the movie would be, you know, the emotional impact. But no, I mean, I guess it's a spoiler to say so, but pretty much everything in this story ends up working out. And I could just see that bothering some people because it is pretty unrealistic, but I mean, it's a cartoon, right? It doesn't have to be real. But still, it's a really great time, and wholesome anime is one of my favorite things, so it's like totally fine. I think the only other aspect of the story that bothered me is kind of a nitpicky thing, but as I was saying, Pompo, the producer character, is like a little girl, but I can't tell if she's supposed to actually be older than Jean or not, Because I can easily suspend my disbelief for something like that, but I just wanted a clearer timeline of like, you know, yeah, she could be a young girl genius. That's totally fine. Anime does that like a lot. Like that doesn't bother me at all. Just what bothered me was the relationship between her and Gene, because I couldn't tell if she was like being a mentor to him because she was older or because she was younger and smarter. They could have just like very easily fixed that with showing a little more of Pompo's backstory or something. Because like whenever it does show a flashback, she looks exactly the same as she does in the present time. So I could never tell if the flashbacks of like her and Gene meeting in the past were like from years ago or from like a few months ago. Again, that's a very nitpicky thing, but I just really wanted that question to be answered while I was watching. Now, aside from the story, pleasant setting, and characters, what really stands out about this movie is the animation style. I was so surprised by the ways this was storyboarded. Like right off the bat, it starts hitting you in the face with really, really awesome transitions and styles and sound effects. When I saw this in theaters, they played a little interview before the movie where the directors briefly talked about their inspirations. And, you know, they said like they tried to put a lot of references to live action movies. And well, yeah, you could definitely see that. But also I feel like so much of what they do with the camera work and the shots and stuff is purely like the exact reasons why I think animation is so interesting. The style that's on display here is like the animation equivalent of an Edgar Wright movie, but it's way more interesting because it's animated, so they could do, you know, so much more with so much more ease without, you know, the limits of live action cameras and stuff. I guess I say Edgar Wright specifically because the style of this movie is very snappy and rhythmic, and there are a ton of interesting transitions. They almost like go out of their way to make sure that every scene transitions in the coolest way possible. Like there was a point where characters started throwing paper in the air, and I was like, oh, that's kind of unnatural. They're probably doing that because they want to do a transition, huh? And then they do, and then they use the falling paper as a transition. I was like, yep, okay, perfect. I love the pleasant coloring. The character designs are really nice. They're really well animated and expressive. There are so many cool shots. It's all around really, really nice to look at, and it's definitely worth watching just for the animation. There's also lots of really cool visuals with eyes. There's sort of like a theme throughout the movie about eyes, but there's also just really interesting compositions of people's reflections in eyes or comparing eyes to cameras. Again, just really cool and innovative visual stuff that would only really work or be done in animation. Despite the fact that the movie is inspired by live action, it really takes complete full advantage of being animated in all sorts of cool visual ways. And I was trying to look into the studio that made this, the directors and stuff, but I mean, maybe the directors have more notable work, but the studio behind this has barely done like anything. Like it kind of seems like they haven't done anything of their own that was really noteworthy, but like, dang, this movie is an awesome start for them if it's, you know, their first movie. It might not be, but for a first movie to see from this team, like this is awesome. This is really, really high caliber. There's also awesome sound design too. It kind of ties into the visual style and the transitions and stuff. There's a lot of really clicky sound effects, like Pompo's always snapping. There's always like a camera click when there's a transition. There's a lot done visually with like film reels, so like the, you know, the clicking of a projector. And a lot of the movie focuses on video editing too. So there's tons of rhythmic keyboard clicks and film splicing and mouse clicks. It's one of those things where like it just made me start thinking about how iconic that sort of sound is to filmmaking. Because I mean, I'm sitting here doing video edits all the time. I went to film school. It's like, yeah, you really hear that kind of like snappy, clicky sound effect all the time from keyboards or from cameras or even from like tripods and stuff. So it's really cool that they incorporated that sound as like a basis for the entire movie's pacing almost. It was really, really cool and just a very nice, noticeable, stylish thing about the movie. Again, gave me a very Edgar Wright sort of vibe to it. There's a great soundtrack too. Probably a lot of the music is like homages to real movie music. I noticed a few tracks that sounded familiar. Like there was definitely like a Man of Steel sounding song at some point, which is, you know, I guess a weird one to pull, but like that's what it sounded like to me anyways. But there's always there's really great swelling music whenever there's an emotional moment or a really like powerful, successful moment. You know, it really, really is like the kind of music where you're like, yeah, I want to follow my dreams. Let's go. And I saw this with the English dub, and it was actually really good too. I very rarely ever don't enjoy English dubs. I think kind of at the start of this movie, I was wary of it. Because the movie does start with a quick musical number, and that's something I love. Anime movies don't do it too often, but when an anime movie starts with like a theme song in the same sort of way that an anime show starts with one, I really love it, because very commonly they frame them in awesome ways, and this one was really cool, but I was caught off guard by the fact that they dubbed over it, which, you know, that's something that they're doing more often, I think. I think they just have more confidence And also they could like sell double the soundtracks if they dub over the songs. That's probably part of why they do it. The English dub version of the song, just the lyrics, not even the singing or the pacing of it or anything, like just the lyrics were kind of like really lame. You know, I think I would have preferred if they kept that song in Japanese, but the fact that they dub it is pretty awesome too. So yeah, that kind of started it off on like a weird foot with the dub, but as it went on, I really ended up enjoying all the actors. Just from reading their names, I think the only actor I was familiar with is the English dub voice for Natalie. She does Iris in the Somniphiles, and she's like amazing. And that game was one of her first roles, I think, but she is so great. Oh, the credits song is really good. It's very pleasant. And while looking for footage for this video, the credits song has its own complete music video with its own like graphic design and animated sequences and stuff. It's definitely worth checking out. Honestly, looking at this music video would give you a better idea of how cool the animation within the movie is. Another interesting thing about this movie that I guess will make more sense if you see it, but there's a plot element. The characters argue about how the length of a movie is very important, which is kind of funny because on the way to see this movie with my friend, we were talking about movie length as well, and then that was like a plot element of the movie. They explain how like 90 minutes is the ideal time for a movie, and then by the end of the movie, once the credits roll, you check your watch and you're like, wow, this movie itself was exactly 90 minutes. And I think that's really awesome, especially because it's animated. You know, I don't really know how timing out animation stuff works. Maybe it's sort of easier because you have to be really strategic about it, but the fact that they were able to hit this exact runtime for the movie to tie into a theme within the movie is just so clever. Like, that's the kind of thing that you only see from something that was made with true care and passion like this was. It's really clever and satisfying, especially how they sort of bring that up again at the very end of the movie. Once the credits roll, you have a smile on your face because you realize how charming the concept was. So overall, this movie was a really great time. It's one that I didn't have the highest expectations for. I thought it was just going to be something pleasant, but I left the theater with a stupid grin on my face and I really want to see it again. It's from a team that I'm not familiar with at all, but I really want to pay attention to them now because they are some creative people. Like, I don't know how much of this is from the manga or what, but like just the style here was so cool. Like, if you want to see a movie with a very interesting style, definitely check this out just for the animation. And seeing it in a theater definitely helped. This is going to be in theaters for a little while, for the next like month or so, probably in only select ones. So, you know, of course it's going to be a pain to find the right ones, but I was really glad that I got to see it in a theater because seeing anime in a theater is always so cool and like weirdly validating for the art form. But usually that does enhance this experience, getting a bigger screen, getting better sound and stuff, especially this movie with what it does with sound. Like I was just really surprised by how well produced this was. It's really wholesome, creative, full of a great cast with a great moral. You know, it should leave you very satisfied and feeling pretty fulfilled. Like I was saying earlier, I can see some people being bothered by just how wholesome it is. Like, everything works out for everybody in the end. Like, there's a very small sequence of a conflict, you know. I guess Ghibli movies kind of go in that direction too. Ghibli movies, I guess, have more direct emotional movements than this movie did, but like, I can see people being bothered by how this is like a total rose-tinted glasses look at media production. But sometimes you need that, you know, not everything needs to be realistic, and this just is so pleasant. It even ended up getting me emotional, not even because of a, you know, like a sad thing. It's more of like one of those times where you get sad because it's so triumphant. Once they think they're finished with the movie, once you see them watching it, hear the reasons why they're making it, I just got emotional from that wholesome dream chasing aspect of it. It's an aspect of the film, but you know, it made my eyes sparkle, both because I was crying and just because I was so impressed. It reminded me a bit of Lou Over the Wall, just because it was so stylish and pleasant, but Pompo is clearly way more grounded than Lou is. I reviewed Lou a while ago. It's definitely much more fantasy, much more classic cartoon inspired. It's way more cartoony. They're both equally adorable, but I think Pompo has a little more going for it just because it has a bit more of a direct moral. It's not just fun like Lou is. Pompo's really trying to push this pleasant, like, never give up sort of idea. So I loved it, and I hope you'll love it too if you check it out. These sorts of obscure movies always end up being great surprises for me, and this one was just so well produced in terms of its animation and such that I wanted to like applaud at it. So if you're looking for something pleasant and stylish, and you're an animation fan, you don't even have to be like a film fan. I feel like this would appeal much more to people who are fans of animation and anime, just because of how cool the style is. So if this sounds like something that would appeal to you, absolutely check it out. You'll hopefully leave with a smile on your face and wanting to, you know, be a film producer, because surely it's just as easy as this movie shows. I always try my best to see movies like this in theaters. I really love watching stuff that is a bit more unknown, because that's usually the stuff that ends up impressing me the most. There's just a lot of times where I gotta cover other topics that are bigger, so I don't have time to make reviews of this sort of stuff. But I'm always watching surprise animes like this. I think just because this one has a focus on filmmaking, it struck a stronger chord with me than some other ones do. So I really wanted to make sure I talked about it. And I really hope that you end up seeing it if it sounds interesting. So thank you very much for watching. And I guess a question could be, what's like another movie or series you've watched that's sort of about film production? Like, I mean, last year I reviewed Shirobaku. That's an anime about making anime. There's a lot of stuff like this. So what are some of your favorite movies or animated movies that are about making a movie, if you have any? Because it seems to be a genre that I really like. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please hit the like button so more viewers like you can find this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel with notifications on to see my future content, and follow me on other sites like TikTok and Twitter for special exclusives. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay tuned for more.